I guess there's not really a problem in this. It's just being part of being human. But
Yes.
there's a tendency, I think, there's probably a kind of grasping quality, I guess, that um that may be part of it. Um, and also to kind of sort of being in that kind of human sense of doubt when you've been in the presence of God, and then he had another appointment or something, and you know it's just very strange. It's I mean, it's not like I'm not changed. It's just that there's part of me that wants to make it smaller, I think, or part of my brain that wants to make it smaller, so that it's something like, well, tomorrow I can take, 2 pills and go back there, or whatever, or just explain or just talk myself back there, you know. And anyway, any thoughts you had on that? Well,
There's a way that that either, meditating or going into nature or just being quiet or being in the presence of certain teachers, just like you said earlier, like however it is that you have that experience of of release or of letting go or of relaxation. Like you said, you're in the presence of God. And and then other times when you are when attention is, and I'll say this, you can correct me if this is not what you're talking about, but where attention is fixated on thought, and when it's fixated on thought, then it's in a totally different relationship. I mean, there's some way in which either the sense of fixation is greatly loosened and expanded when there's when you're meditating or when you're in the presence of transmission or when you're in nature or whatever it is that you do to or don't do, where you find yourself expanded, find yourself in the presence. And and then there's being fixated on thought, which gives a sense of contraction and then a relationship. See, you could say ultimately, you could say when there's really a peak experience, there's no sense of being fixated at all, and indeed, not even a sense of tracking. You're simply the entire experience of perception, and even beyond the experience of perception. And perception is just happening, and maybe it's happening in you, or maybe you are perception for a few moments or for longer, and then the mind on the periphery, maybe even just like slightly, is there going, wow, or maybe not even saying anything but just noticing, which is an exalted state. This is wonderful. This is this is what I wanted, whatever. And then there's a eventually a focusing on thought. And so the experience then is kind of it's a little bit like how would I could picture it as there's kind of a ratio there, like the more that the I, ego, thinker, experiencer is subtle or non-existent, the more the presence of presence is there. And then the more contracted I is there, then it's in a relationship with that presence now, because it's there trying to capture something that it remembers or intuits happened. Sometimes it's bigger than memory, even, like, what was all of that? But trying to find the breadcrumbs back, trying to describe it, like you said. So we're on the same page so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this creates a kind of it's like you said, it's human, it's understandable, it's duality between the expansion of attention and a contraction of attention, and an apparent dilemma of wanting to get back to where you were before. And the irony is now there's a person in relationship to this experience, where before there was barely a person in relationship to the experience, and sometimes no person in relation to the experience, right? Which was like what the person wanted, but at the time when it's happening, there's very little of the person there. So now the person returns. Now there's a person, and it's in relationship to this other thing, and it wants it, and it keeping track, and it treats, sometimes realizing, but really without realizing, it treats the expansion as like a possession, a feather in its cap. It's something it's like to own. It's something it's like to have again. It's a validation of the ego. It's a validation of the small one, of one's existence is worthwhile. I'm a spiritual person, and I just had a spiritual experience. And maybe you tell your friends or your loved ones that, or you just write it in your journal, or you note to yourself that you are a worthwhile individual. You have done this thing. You are somebody. You are on the spiritual path. You are doing it correctly. And the irony in that, of course, is that one that is holding in all of that is the only distraction that is there from that always being the case. So what to do with this human form, what to do with this kind of ego that owns a body and has a life, rather than the more expanded sense in which, a little bit more expanded, and you are a body, and even more expanded, the body is arising in you. And when the body is in you, arising in you, you really don't have much to do with making any of that happen. Your life is happening. But when you're in a body and you own a body, then from the position of being in a body, owning a body, then you look out and there's a world full of unpredictable things that are threats to the body, and people who you have to impress because they might withdraw love or money or good fortune from you, or all kinds of things can happen where you have to concern yourself with all of that world. Does this ring true at all so far, Andrew? Yeah. So that one, which we all know, this ego, which is a kind of in a certain way is a pretense based in fear, as much a pretense to hold our own hand, like talking to ourselves so that we can feel better about things, or feel in control of things, or feel a sense of agency that is continuously threatened to be taken from us. So traditionally, and from my perspective, the way to say tame the ego, or to position ourselves or orient ourselves, like speaking as an ego, the way to orient ourselves towards existence that is most conducive to cooperating with a larger sense of things, or the more expanded sense of ourselves, is to be a servant, is to recognize that we are a servant. Because this contracted sense of ourselves, the ego, the sense of ourselves that wants to own things and wants to own life, yes, it's ultimately not real. You can call it an activity. You can call it a sense of ourselves that comes from squeezing ourselves. But it actually has a sense of solidity, but that squeezing of ourselves. So it feels all the more real that we exist in a body and we are this energy. I can feel myself. See, because if you take a hose and you put your finger over the hose, it actually has a kind of force that it doesn't have otherwise. But if there's room, then it really doesn't. There's a lot of water that just kind of is open. It doesn't have that pressure. But when you have that pressure, you really feel, I exist. I'm real. That one, like I said, creates a situation where there's a whole universe out there, right? There's a kind of, I'm here and all the rest is there, and it's beyond my control for the most part. It's filled with all these other beings who are not me, who can do whatever they want, more or less. And all kinds of events that are not me that can unfold in all kinds of ways that are unpredictable. And I do my best, my darndest, to kind of align myself and work myself, try to get protection for me and mine. But it's always threatened. It's always, out of control. So what to do is to recognize that as a part of this whole, my job is to be a servant. I have no ultimate control. It's really politically incorrect now. It's really not fashionable to speak this way at all. But it's the way all spiritual traditions have spoken. All of them, every one of them, really. Is to be a servant or to be a slave. If we're speaking in terms of God, certainly to be a slave to the whole, to the all, to the goddess, to the God, to the guru. And I'm not talking about a physical guru now. I'm talking about the source of all transmission, the whole. And if you're like a servant to your spouse or your dear friends or your family or anything that you feel affinity for, including, it could be in some cases, your country, but whatever you or your company, I mean, those are all, if you feel that these are appropriate to serve, then even serving those is your means to serve the whole. And serving the whole is serving God, serving the whole of existence. We are here for no other reason in terms of being finite beings. We are destined to die. There isn't anything in us that we can hold on to. There isn't anything in us that we can own, or nothing outside that we can own ultimately. Everything is a given. And all spiritual experiences have to be let go of and given back to God. Forgotten, not important. We are not important at all. Now, I can contradict that and say we are incredibly important as expressions and manifestations, momentary fireworks, um, uh, as beautiful as any of, like, was it Christ said, the lilies of the field, right? I mean, we are expressions of the divine, most definitely, but not the one that's holding and trying. That one will align itself with being an expression of the divine by letting go, by recognizing that we're nothing, by recognizing that we are servants. Now, that's a tall order for us. It's not just, oh, okay, I'll do that. It's a struggle. We are afraid of what that can mean to just let go and not be counted or accounted for, recognized as being whatever. But no matter how we are recognized, it is so impermanent. No one will remember us after we die, or at least a few more generations from us. Even if they do, if people remember you from reading a book or seeing a photograph, it won't affect you in the least. You'll be beyond the ability to be affected by that. You won't even know about it. I mean, it's just, I mean, we're just not in a position to own anything, including spiritual experiences. So to basically align ourselves simply to act from compassion, act from love. Now, again, this is not easy. I lose my temper because I get frightened and I clench, and then I just notice, okay, what am I doing? Let go. Just let go. Just let go. Just let go again and again. But in terms of the ego sense, to be a servant to the goddess, to God, to the whole, to recognize that your existence is just that, is to place yourself or to orient yourself toward the whole in such a way that the ego itself becomes more and more pliable, open, translucent, transparent. So it's kind of burning the candle at both ends. By all means, meditate, put yourself in the field of beings who you receive transmission with. Do whatever practices that open you up. Spend time in nature. Do all of those things that are conditional things that we usually do to escape from the sense of contraction. But in the sense of contraction, be a servant. Recognize that all you have is this moment. There is only now. You don't own anything beyond now. Everything that you've done before is gone. It's nowhere to be seen. It's just a memory, a thought construct. And what there is here now is the only thing you truly own, this moment. Whatever is arising, whatever is happening, any sense of discontent with it, we have to bring our attention in, feel the feelings associated with that. I'll give ourselves the space so that energetically it opens. And also find contentment with what is. right now, here. That spiritual practice of finding contentment here in this humble, unenlightened, spiritually not quite where it should be, whatever. Like, okay, that's great. And then let go of that idea as well. Just let go of all of that, because all you are is a servant to the primal mover of all things, the one that's beating your heart, the one that's breathing your body, the one that is giving you this or that experience. And she's the only intelligence that is sufficient or able to know when our next experience of expansion should be, and not a second sooner or a moment sooner. And so to find contentment at her feet with this, what is. So working at the level of mind, of thought, to be cooperative with what is. And you know, if there's a struggle there, then that's the struggle right here, right now. That's what is. I'm feeling this is difficult, whatever. I'd like this or that. And it's like, okay, there it is. Here it is. So this kind of working with the mind as a servant, as a devotee, as a bhakta, as a disciple, so that every experience is what Padmasambhava or the goddess or whatever you want to say is giving you. There's a Tibetan notion that the circumstance is the teacher, the teachings of the teacher. It's that. There's a Christian notion that you're being purified through whatever is coming your way. These are trials, testing of faith, trusting that this is exactly what's supposed to happen for me to develop whatever virtue there is: patience, kindness, gentleness. And I say this as somebody who often is flunking this, because this is the most horizontal level. This is the level where you don't ever get done. It's the continuous. It's like the Tibetans have a kind of a grading system. They say if you do the sutric level, it'll take you, 100,000 lives to get awakened. If you do the tantric level, 6 or 7. If you do the Dzogchen Mahamudra, then you can get it in this life. I actually feel like these are different dimensions of ourselves. I mean, in terms of the, kind of behavioral purification that happens purely at the level of mind, or of Dharma, Nirmanakaya level, or Sutric level, or embodied human identity level. It's not appropriate to be thinking in terms of ending. It's not appropriate to be thinking in terms of enlightenment. It's appropriate to think, well, maybe in 100 billion lives I'll get enlightened, but right now, right in this moment, I let go. Right in this moment, I surrender. Right in this moment, I relax. And I'm not keeping track of when I'll be there. Now, in the moment when you're, resting in being, when you're in that more expanded state, then it's like, oh, I'm almost there. Look, there's only 7 lives or 4 lives or whatever it's going to be. But in the moments when we are identified as an ego and we're like, oh, why am I, like you said, the human part, then it's just not even worth bothering about that. You can submit yourself to being a lowly spiritual practitioner who never was exposed to any high teachings and is just going to surrender to the goddess who gave me that experience before. So
well, that's beautiful. And I very much relate to the being a servant. Although I think that even that can go, well, when you're saying, well, you are everything and I am nothing to God. But, well, that just depends on how contracted that is. I mean, that could be
yes.
the good news. But I just somehow I don't think my mind always goes there. And I was just also thinking, on the other hand, this kind of almost demands to know. A way of putting it was like, if you say the peace of God that passeth all understanding. But so how do I understand the peace of God that passes all?
Right. That's it. So there's nothing to do but laugh, because you understand there's nothing to do but laugh.